we can't stop them entirely, but can we at least wait a little bit? Hey folks, MasakoX here. If you're not aware of it, but the latest chapter of the Dragon Ball Super manga came out, and needless to say, it's brought a lot of things that are concerning about the fandom into sharp relief. And once again, we cannot rely on spoilers to base a solid conclusion on events in the manga. Definitely twice in succession, we were proven wrong, and poor Vegeta cut him some slack. Chapter 76 of Dragon Ball Super the manga has been a lot to unpack in the past few days. It is for certain though an interesting read, and has at least gotten people talking about the manga instead of just, ignoring it or treating it like Super Dragon Ball heroes. But the crux of the reason why I really wanted to bring this to the table is about spoilers, and don't worry, if you've seen the manga, I ain't spoiling you further. It's to do with the constant jumping up and down with spoilers that we get a week or so before the actual manga comes out, and people jump to conclusions. Sure, I read the spoilers, it's my job to do it, but I try my best not to spoil it for others before the actual chapter comes out, and yes, I may have fumbled in the past, and for that I do apologise. So with my prediction videos that I started for 76, they're all based on what we already know and what I conject going forward. I think that's more fun in a way, but the point is that the last 3 times we assumed that the spoilers would be wholly accurate, they weren't. There was more to it, ultimately, than just the first few pages that we saw, barely 10% of the actual chapter. It's also exacerbated the old tired trope of Vegeta taking L's left, right and centre, and this time, it's all more nuanced than that. The Vegeta we're seeing here is not the same Vegeta we saw back in the Saiyan saga. He wasn't trying to do his usual shtick of a simple victory. And the spoilers got his fans riled, condemning Super before even reading it properly. I get that people are excited to find out what happens, but please, wait until it comes out until you clamour about it. And better yet, save your final judgment once the entire saga's complete. So what I ask of you is to not rely on spoilers solely. By doing that, you might fail to see the true meaning behind Vegeta's actions. And today, we wish to share that with you, as the first act of this saga comes to a close. So when it came to that said conclusion of the first act of the Granolah saga, some of us really liked it, whilst others really hated the whole thing, totally denouncing it as something that isn't Dragon Ball and is trash writing. But, yeah, that kind of disconnect happens. It's not like either of those opinions are invalid entirely. That's the whole point of having a discussion about it. That's fine. So that we may get a general consensus perhaps about the series and see where it resonates well with folks and where it doesn't. One thing is perpetually correct though. You cannot please everybody, nor should you try to. Believe me, I wrote Goku married Bulma Part 17. I should know. Although it's no secret that Haverock and I are on the positive side of the whole debate, us really liking this saga and where it's going, our goal though is not to invalidate the criticisms that people may have had for this particular portion of the manga. But since we don't represent that point of view, we want to dissect one key element of Vegeta's arc in the Granolah the Survivor portion of the story that makes it hit particularly hard, in an emotional way. You can check out our main review for the chapter that I did on Monday in the pinned comment below, as well as our podcast where we went even further in depth to chapter 76 in regards to what happened, link up top. We really liked this chapter because it gave us a lot to talk about, and today's video is no exception. These posts here are only just a few of the reactions people had to the emotional core of the story, and are just a small fraction, certain perspectives that we saw. But we find their perspectives to be rather interesting. As we stated a few times in our previous videos regarding said chapter, there's a lot of reflecting going on here in this particular story arc. As we're getting closer to the end of Z's state of affairs with our Saiyans and their different outlooks on life, the pieces for the puzzle are really now starting to be put together. Goku and Vegeta as a contrast, then there's Vegeta and Granolah, Vegeta and Beerus, Saiyans and Ceruleans, Goku and Bardock, Ultra Ego and Ultra Instinct. Those things are here for a reason. They tell a story outside of the usual Dragon Ball face punching and juvenile humour of the early days, screaming your head off. This entire saga is all about remorse and lamentations. It is a story about guilt, regret, and revenge, making Granolah think that the way ahead feels lonely, as well as empathy and forgiveness. It's all about trying to accept the past and realise, as Rafiki once said, you can either run from it or you learn from it. Monkeys gotta look out for one another, am I right? Because apes together, strong. But the largest part of this overall narrative details a story about two men who never found closure for certain parts of their respective lives. No, we're actually not talking about Goku here. That he didn't know about his parents, that's not really bothered him all that much, or at all. But we will be seeing that come about, and I am thoroughly excited to see what happens, but that's not the point of this video. This story is clearly about Vegeta and Granolah, realizing that they are not so different, him and he. Let's say this outright, just so there's no confusion. Before Granolah activated his second eye, Vegeta was most likely able to destroy him, and yet he didn't. Vegeta had a plan for him right from the moment that he realized what had gone down in the past on planet Cereal 40 years ago. That whole detective work thing wasn't a brief trope. That was the prince being smart, figuring things out for the entire picture, understanding that Granolah isn't entirely evil, because the Cerealians weren't entirely evil to begin with. Think about it. If Vegeta was testing the grounds and fully intending to destroy the bounty hunter in the heat of battle with his new alter ego powers, he would have caught him off guard using his smarts, destroying him entirely, despite the power gap. A gap, mind you, that started to shrink with each passing moment of the battle. Now, of course, Granolah was able to realize his potential and got the upper hand, and we've also seen the argument that this was a repetition of the semi-perfect Cell fight, but that Vegeta got so drunk and heady with power that he didn't think he could lose. But this time around, that mode of thinking doesn't seem right. Vegeta in this one seemed genuinely surprised that Granolah had activated his second eye, which is actually entirely possible, by the way. Granolah got wished his entire power set, but that didn't necessarily mean he knew exactly how to use it 100% in one go. It would still require practical use to come about. In short, the power was there, he just needed to realize it was there. Our conviction in this idea that this isn't a repeat of the Bugman battle came from our big video last week. There, we analysed the prince's journey in a really in-depth video, probably one of our longest discussions yet, and if this Granolah-Vegeta battle were a carbon copy of the Vegeta Cell battle, that would be a genuinely serious regression, right? Right, and true. Vegeta started to enjoy himself like he did back in the day with his newfound power, but he never lost sight of his true goal that he had set himself in that encounter before he jumped into the battle to take over from Goku. The goal was never to kill Granolah, despite what he said. The goal was to get through to him in his own special way. There was no way that he was going to be doing it like Goku's done in the past, going, "Oh, by the way, you're not evil, you know. I think that you're good." Nah, Vegeta is more direct in his approach to things. And if it requires a punch to the face, then a punch in the face you're gonna get. And true, his usual tsundere-esque dialogue toward Goku about not willing to work with him is janky and could have been phrased a little better in the moment. This being the case for years actually at this point, but except this time there's something different. We're willing to cut him some slack because, to put it frankly, Goku this time was getting in the way. Goku was spoiling the plan by getting Granolah angry before Vegeta had finished, ruining the flow of the prince's plan to make Granolah understand the enormity of what he was doing, and to get him to back off without relying on words because clearly talking to the hunter was not going to cut it anymore. In Vegeta's mind, Kakarot would never understand the Cerealian as he does. Why would he? He has no context. Vegeta remembers the Cerealians in his studies in becoming the next King Vegeta. I believe there's a lot of studying about what different societies were like. Granolah being this barbaric and anarchic? That's an anomaly. An anomaly that Vegeta wishes to understand and perhaps diffuse. What Vegeta is trying to protect Granolah from is something that he will never be truly free of. Basically, Vegeta's trying to tell the Cerealian to not make the same mistakes he did. But also, and this is the tragic part, it's important to remember Vegeta and Goku don't know about the 3 years left to live thing. That probably will come back later. Vegeta's regrets were alluded to in the Moro saga, where we saw him apologise to the Namekians for the way he behaved back in the day when he was younger. But here, now, we can finally see that Vegeta is genuinely haunted by what he and the other Saiyans did to other people. Now, if you think that, oh, this is weak, that Vegeta should never apologise for anything, that's backwards thinking. You want Vegeta to not be boring, right? Then let him eschew his iconography of 3 decades a little bit. Evolve. That's what people have been clamouring for, right? Something fresh with a major character, something new? Shueisha are actually dipping their toes here with this plot thread, don't scare them off. Even though he has a family, even though he turned a new leaf and saved people countless of times, there are still things, and there will always be things, Vegeta can never fix. Things that not even the Dragon Balls can fix. They will always be stuck in his head, his very big forehead. Now you might say that this is regression, but on a human level, on a personal level, it's hard to move on after losing someone, even if that someone passed on peacefully. I remember the last day I saw my dad. He was in good form. He was happy despite his many health problems. We had trouble growing up, but in the last 10 years or so, we really turned a corner and had actually rather grown close. I finally saw him for who he was, and we bonded better than in any other part of our lives. We had no regrets, no harbourings of resentment. I got to say goodbye in a way, and I had a hug. He died peacefully in his bed that night. But it's far worse, I can imagine, if your last encounter was sudden, or if that last meeting left you with regret. Despite my final moments with my dad being amiable, there are still some things that I blame myself for, even though I know there's nothing I could have done. I miss him. I actually still look at my last text with him, actually. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, missing somebody close to us or not getting the chance to properly reconcile where it was possible. While our regrets and guilt will have different sources or journeys that the one that our favourite Saiyan prince has had gone down over the decades, we still encounter them in everyday life. And for some of them, we'll never be able to get proper closure, which often ends with us subconsciously taking blame for them and reliving past moments almost every day, even though it may not really matter in the long run. But sometimes, you just can't help it. Now, imagine being Vegeta in this situation, remembering all the stuff that he had done to the Namekians and other victims, and he was just one Saiyan. Now that there are no more Saiyans to pay for their crimes against Cereal, Vegeta is more than willing to take the blame here. The sins of his people are now squarely on his shoulders, and this is voluntarily. This has nothing to do with Goku, since he may be a Saiyan, but he doesn't act like one, nor does he comprehend the history of them. Vegeta is the last true remaining Saiyan, the last bastion of Saiyan culture, so he solely has the burden. He pushes Goku away not to be a jerk or being like his old self, but because in his mind, Goku isn't responsible for any of this, as mentally, the taller monkey is still more Earthling than Saiyan, despite now wanting to accept his Saiyan roots like he showed with Broly. Vegeta wants Granolah to realise that there is more to life than revenge, something that he learned the hard way, while being a much more evil person than Granolah could ever be. Isn't it a rather poetic case of irony that, having learned to use the power to destroy, Vegeta is using that power to save someone for a change? Isn't that cool? To give someone a chance for a better life using something that is meant to snuff life out? To even pay with his own life to give them both closure? Yes, that moment of dialogue Vegeta had whilst facing certain doom was a little weak. It could have been done better, but the actions themselves that you saw on the panel were still emotive. It just didn't land quite properly is all. Vegeta is willing to accept his people's fate, paying for all of the guilt that he's still holding within himself, as much as he tries to deny it on the surface, giving Granolah a clear villain to take out, while holding on enough to show him the dangers of losing oneself to vengeance. If Vegeta can save Granolah from a life of anguish and pain, then he is prepared to do it. It's a very intense and emotional moment that, true, mirrors certain Vegeta tropes that we've seen throughout the years, but it flips them on their head. Thank you. Goku would never be able to work with Granolah like this, because his method of redeeming works mostly with people that have a basic enjoyment of martial arts. And I think that that model of reasoning with people, that's just not going to work anymore. It's becoming less and less reliable as time wears on. It failed Goku against Broly, it failed Goku against Moro, and it's as good as failed him against Granolah. The Cerulean is not enjoying the fight. He got this power as a means to an end, like Moro. He obsessed with getting closure that he never thought he would have gotten, and in a way, Vegeta thinks like this as well. That's why they're so connected. And it is somewhat tragic, like I mentioned earlier, that none of the protagonists are made aware of the fact that Granolah has paid so much for this power. But take a step back and ask yourself, would the Frieza saga Vegeta say no if he stood before a similar choice? I don't think so. That is why I think that this particular fake out shows us the best of the prince. How far Vegeta has come as a character after many years of being really dumb and making foolish decisions. He was using a technique called Ultra Ego for crying out loud. But in the back of his head, he had the concern and understanding of his enemy at heart. Did it hold him back from being an effective fighter? Possibly, but definitely not entirely. But it moved him forward as a person, that's for sure. Was he acting stupidly during the fight? Oh yeah, no doubt. He could have got it done a bit sooner. But the point is that all of this behaviour had motivation, why he didn't just use blind foolishness to end the fight early, that we often overlook in this character. And as far as Dragon Ball goes with tackling some more serious topics, this method of handling was actually not so bad. It's certainly far better than what Super tried to do in regards to justice with old Zammy boy here. Sure, the day seems to have been saved by a miraculous revelation about Bardock, but at the same time, we are sure that the things Vegeta said to Granolah will stay with the bounty hunter once he calms down. In punchy terms, Vegeta didn't get a clear W. He didn't exactly win, but he abstained from fighting further. But if you flip this around and look at it from another angle, Vegeta might be the genuine winner of the arc, and a reminder that even magical space monkey men can have regrets that will haunt them, which I think is comforting to readers in some way. It's ironic how the most Saiyan of Saiyans has become the most human. Again, we don't want to invalidate critiques against this chapter, nor do we plan to bash anybody who hadn't seen the chapter in such a favourable light, but maybe after watching this essay, you'll sort of understand what we find so appealing in the story. And if not, all the power to you. Let's respectfully agree to disagree. Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I will see you in the next video. Catch you later.